So yeah, the title of my talk is How Arweave Expands Over Time. One of the beautiful things about Arweave, of course, is that it's designed for the very long term. I think this is an anomaly in today's world online where many things are directed on short form and oftentimes or sometimes disappear. So this is a really beautiful architecture. And the other thing is that when we look at this time horizon and we think in centuries, Arweave's been around for over 7.5 years. Now, in the landscape of blockchain, that's quite a long time. In the landscape for Arweave, that is like a seedling, right? It's just getting started. And I absolutely love to think in these terms because 7.5 years for a lot of things is a long time. For Arweave, it's really not. Now, it's not to diminish the time of 7.5 years. It's quite a feat. It's really just to emphasize how much more room there is to grow on the time horizon. And what's so cool about Arweave is that you can actually preserve seconds of time for centuries. Now, over time, Arweave becomes more interesting. And this is my view on it, and I think many of us in the room share this. When Sam and others invented Arweave, there was a real emphasis on what I'll call social utility. And in that social utility, it's like the core civilization data, political documents, news, government data. And we've seen this continue to be a core component of what's stored on Arweave. And I think that many of us in this room will agree that it's important that we have a place to access this information outside the bounds of either a government or a corporation. And this is so fundamental and such a beautiful thing that Arweave has enabled right from the start. Then we get in, over time, we saw more emotional and app layer kind of dynamics. Memories through platforms like Arweave, NFTs through things like Metaplex, the Candy Machine, and millions of NFTs, collections, right? These are cultural artifacts. Regardless of where you think NFTs are going or anything like that, it's important that these things are on an immutable ledger that is designed for centuries. And then we also have decentralized apps, right? So again, this theme of Arweave becomes more interesting over time. You have entire front ends that if the centralized front end went down, you can access it through Arweave. That is a huge deal when you want to do something online that you otherwise cannot do. And now we have compute. I did not see this coming. I don't know if anyone else saw this in the room coming. I did not see the actual logs of computation being a giant use case for Arweave. I just didn't see that. And data as compute, it's really kind of an epiphany to me. And so Arweave at large is a communication layer for civilization and a log of computation. And today, compute is communication. Now we have agents speaking with agents. We have a whole society, a whole agent civilization. We probably want to have logs of what's going on. Probably want a way to access it that is not just bound by a corporate entity. And this, of course, is thanks to AO Computer, which I think, again, I did not think in my mind that this was going to be possible to integrate and build an entirely new architecture of decentralized supercomputers utilizing permanent storage. It's this substrate that continues to give. So where does Arweave go from here, right? This is my lens. This is how I see things. We talked about core civilization data, the long internet, the PermaWeb, these apps, these emotional kind of layers, and of course, computation. So here's a few ideas where I think Arweave can go. Arweave is going everywhere, okay? And the reason why I think it's going everywhere, I think is somewhat logical. The internet as we know it is being laid upon the physical world. Now, Meta recently released these heads-up displays. There's potentially more in-ear, contextual, relevant things as you're walking on Earth. I just imagine the internet and all of the information just being laid upon us, and we can look and see. And when one thinks about that, we probably don't want things just disappearing in our locales, in our neighborhoods. We probably want some things to stick around. So I think back to like the ancient Greek statues, carved in stone. Now with Arweave, we can think about the augmented world that we are all entering very likely very soon. And we can imagine creating these digital sculptures. And maybe the equivalent of a digital sculpture today can be a poem that you wrote in some park. And that can be passed down for generations to come. And you can experience history by walking through lenses of decades in any given place. And that to me is so incredibly inspiring and such a platform for new ideas as we're able to connect with the past. The other is sensors. There's more and more sensors that we wear, like this on my wrist, phones, and all sorts of devices. And what's so great about AO Computer is that it uses HTTP message signing to make it very seamless for IoT devices to connect to Arweave ultimately. This is like an amazing pathway to bring in a bunch of sensor data. One can imagine a world where there's science research done with these sensors that pipe through AO Computer and are stored on an immutable ledger. That to me is really inspiring. Open source science, I think, can go a long way. In addition to that, you know, we want to know like what's actually going on in the world with these sensors. It's not just about science, it's about civilization. One of the things here, which I think is really fun, is that we can play with sensors in unique ways. So this is like the blockchain ball. Hope shared it earlier. And this actually connects with AO. Now, it's a fun blockchain ball right now, and you can see how high you throw it, and it's all logged on Arweave. You can also just imagine, you know, the sensor data contributing to our civilization at large, especially when there's millions and potentially billions of these sensors into the future. And then there's AI, right? Like, Arweave gets more interesting with time, is really the thesis that I have. It's the ideal place to store open source models. This may become more of like a human digital right, access to open models. And where do you want to have those? You probably want to have them in as many places around the world as possible, which by design Arweave enables. In addition to that is thinking about like human verified data. How are we going to know who's human, right? It's important that we're able to have this immutable set, potentially with verified devices and the like. So this is just a thesis. These are theses. This is a perspective that I have, again, with this mantra that Arweave gets more interesting and more useful over time. So for those of you on Twitter, check out Only Arweave, and thank you so much.